Welcome to Now You Know BC. I'm Bob Kronbauer, also known as BC Bob, and on this show I introduce you to interesting people, places to go, things to see, things that have happened in the past. You will hear our collective stories. This week we're talking about farming in our province, from the history of tobacco production here to a ranch in Cache Creek that's somehow home to the best taco stand in BC, to a 100-year-old farming invention that you probably have in your fridge right now. Let's dig in. Did you know there used to be a bunch of tobacco farms in BC? It's true, the Sealed people in the Okanagan had been growing it for a long time before settlers arrived, and that inspired some of the new folks to set up commercial operations and have a go at farming it for profit. In the 1910s, hundreds of acres were put to use as tobacco farms in Kelowna and the surrounding area, and some of the old curing buildings are still standing there. The British North American Tobacco Company had a facility right downtown where they produced 800,000 cigars every year, but a crash in the market left them reeling and eventually going out of business in 1914. About 10 years later, another tobacco company popped up there under the name Kelowna Pride. They produced mostly pipe tobacco and cigarettes with their crops, and they went out of business during the Depression in the 1930s. A couple other operations started in the years that followed, but nothing ever really came of tobacco in the Okanagan, despite it being a pretty decent place to grow it. Another hotspot for tobacco growing was in the Fraser Valley, specifically the bottom of Sumas Lake. Of course, this was in the 1920s after the lake was completely drained and the river was diverted to create new farmland. One of the first things they grew here was tobacco. And there was a lot of experimentation that went on with farmers trying to perfect their crops on what they called reclaimed land that was once a lake bottom and which sustained the Sumas First Nation folks for thousands of years prior to this. That aside, the farmers, they did pretty good. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of tobacco were farmed here until a massive flood, sounds familiar, in the Sumas Prairie happened in 1935, devastating their operations. At the same time, a lot of smokers were thumbing their noses at BC tobacco, believing it tasted inferior to the stuff grown out east. It certainly didn't have the same reputation that BC Bud developed decades later. And in the industry in the valley, it lasted until the 1950s, then it disappeared. But not completely. Mary and John Kovacs were the original owners of this property, and they grew and cured tobacco here. Next time you're driving by, look out for their original kilns. They're on the side of the highway, just past Castle Fun Park, a few kilometers towards Chilliwack. And speaking of things that people do for fun, a lot has happened with crops that you can smoke in BC over the decades. That's a whole other thing. I don't partake, but there's a whole lot of stories that we can tell about that legal crop in a future episode. And now you know. We're going to a break, and when we come back, we're talking to Potato Ty.